12th week of protests against the controversial judiciary reforms, and both the protests and reforms are stepping up a notch in what is a crucial week for Benjamin Netanyahu's government and for Israel. In the final week before the Knesset's Passover recess, the government is trying to pass as many laws regarding Supreme Court appointments as it can, as well as a law that would allow Shas leader and ex-convict Aryeh Deri to serve in the cabinet and to ban hametz, food that is not kosher for Passover, in hospitals during the Jewish holiday. Meanwhile, the protests have intensified with the so-called Week of Paralysis ahead, following the largest protest to date on Saturday. And the rift is not only in society. Cracks are also showing in the Likud party, with Defence Minister Yoav Gallant publicly urging Netanyahu to halt the reforms, citing security risks within the IDF. And with reports that Gallant is not the sole rebel in the coalition, the government's majority for these reforms is on a knife edge. Will they pass, fail, or be halted? Was Gallant's statement an explosion for the coalition, or just a damp squib? With the days of paralysis failing to halt the reform so far, will the week of paralysis make a difference? What can be expected this week in Israel?
Okay, dearest panelists, our main question for your kickstarting question for today's summit was what can be expected this week in Israel? But let me rephrase, what can we expect this hour in Israel? A quick fire round and we take it from there. Ruthie Blum, what is happening?
Oh, well, I think that we can certainly expect a new defense minister to be appointed, and the name that's being suggested is Avi Dichter. And that is also dramatic because it wasn't entirely certain that he was going to support the reforms to the end, and he was seeking a compromise. So now, I don't know that he's going to be the one appointed, but he seems the most likely candidate.
Ben-Dror, Yemini, your take.
It's a dramatic moment, let's admit it. It's a dramatic moment because the Prime Minister of Israel actually declared a kind of war against the protest, a declaration of war against so many people in Israel. I mean, maybe they are wrong, maybe they are not. It's not the question right now. The question is, what are we doing to ourselves? He does not understand that maybe, just maybe, the defense minister, he's still the defense minister, maybe he is right. Maybe his arguments and what he said yesterday evening was correct. And if he was correct, and I think he was, what Netanyahu is doing is a declaration of war.
Zaki, your thoughts?
We see the birth of a tyrant. We see a birth of, at one point, a legitimate politician, a legitimate leader who decided to use all of his political force to change Israel's regime from a democracy to an autocracy. He's doing that even against very threats to security to Israel as a country we're facing.
Okay, dearest panelists, let's feel free to engage in a conversation from this point onwards. But Ruthie, I do want to begin with you. Did Netanyahu make the right call, sacking his own defense minister from his own party?
Absolutely, and it was not that he's declaring war on the protesters. The protesters are declaring war on the democratically elected government. And the reason that Yoav Gallant, the now former or soon-to-be former defense minister, yesterday took the opportunity of a trip that Netanyahu took to London to go on the airwaves and undermine his entire coalition. What he said was actually true, that there are huge security challenges and that an increase in reservists and perhaps regular soldiers who are going to refuse to serve in the army is a huge danger. Now, that's correct. We are facing huge dangers. Iran, Hezbollah, the Palestinian Authority, we are. But it's the soldiers who should be called to task, not, their blackmail shouldn't be given into. So I think that Gallant either should have resigned, or certainly, if not, he should have been fired, yes.
Ben-Dror.
Okay, let me tell you, it's many people from the right. Let's not forget it. Yaakov Ben-Dror, Professor Dan Shiftan, and many others. And even a letter from Likud Members Party that was sent to the Prime Minister just a few days ago, asking him, begging him, please, 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 do something in order to get a compromise, in order that this reform will be in a kind of way that will include so many people and much more people from the opposition. You do not do such a constitutional change by forcing the people, but you don't even have a majority in the public opinion. We see it in every poll. So what did Gallant do? He just tried to tell the prime minister, look, we have a problem. We have a problem. And what Netanyahu is doing? What is Netanyahu is doing is sacking the one who is telling him we have a problem, someone who is actually expressing the view of most of the Israelis, including so many from the Likud party. I mean, it's terrible. It's a terrible moment for Israel. We have to admit it.
Okay, well, Zaki, before we get your take, I do want us to take a listen to part of Yoav Gallant's remarks last night, remarks that got him sacked this very hour. Let's take a listen.
In recent days and weeks, during conversations and discussions behind the scenes, I presented the security situation to our various parties. I asked, reasoned, and said that at this time, the process must be stopped, so that we may sit and talk. But now, I declare loudly and publicly, for the sake of Israel's security, for the sake of our sons and daughters, the legislative process should be stopped in order to enable the nation of Israel to celebrate Passover and Independence Day together, and to mourn together on Memorial Day and Holocaust Remembrance Day. These are holy days for us.
Zaki, do you understand the right-wing criticism that Gallant, in a sense, was rewarding, quote-unquote, insubordination, rewarding the levels of pressure applied within the army's frameworks?
Listen, I won't play the game of rationalizing, a game of tyrant, a game of non-democracy. Gallant, which is very odd for this particular government, did what he had to do. He's the Minister of Defense. He understands there are defense challenges, and he expressed them. And he said, how can you stop them? All other ministers in this government, the Minister of Justice is against the judiciary. The Minister of Transportation is against public transportation. The Minister of so-called national security is doing everything but national security. Gallant, which is odd for Netanyahu's current government, did what he had to do according to his position. And what was his reward? Being sacked. They don't want to listen to the truth. You know, it's the same with the economists. You have the chief of the Israel Bank saying, you know, the economy is about to collapse. You hear about all 300 economists saying the economy is going to be severely affected by this reform, so-called reform, this overhaul. They're going to sack them too. And, you know, listening to Ruthie, that's the most sad thing. Like that people like, you know, decent people like Ruthie are much like those who say, you know, January 6th rioters were actually freedom fighters who were fighting for democracy. It's the same thing. This is not democracy. This is this week will be an attempt to end Israeli democracy. I hope that the Supreme Court of Israel will be strong enough to stop this.
Ruthie.
Look, Uri, that's not the first time you've told me that I'm like the January 6th Trump people. And I really don't mind that. But I disagree. I think that what we're seeing here, it's not that Netanyahu doesn't acknowledge that there's a problem. The entire country sees there's a problem. What the disagreement is, about whether
Minister of Defense.
I think he should have, because what he did was undermine the work of the government that's trying to explain to the public that this is not a dictatorship and will not be a dictatorship. And Netanyahu made a speech on Thursday.
The treatment of a dictator.
No,
exactly
that's
the treatment that
no.
dictators
Excuse
do.
me. No, that is
In a democratic government, when a minister who's responsible for something, for a portfolio, expresses his professional view, he's not being sacked.
Excuse me.
That's in a dictatorship.
Expressed
When
no.
Putin doesn't like his general's point of view,
No,
he sacks them.
no. But that's not what happened here. He didn't just express his view.
That's exactly
he
what
had a
happened here.
meeting with Netanyahu on Thursday. Netanyahu told him, "Hold off on your declarations. Let me make my speech, and then we'll discuss it." And when Netanyahu was in London, that's when Gallant got up and made this announcement to the nation. All right, he didn't
The vote is tomorrow,
explain this.
Ruthie. The vote is tomorrow. Till when was it supposed to wait?
Excuse me, this vote is a reason for soldiers to refuse to serve? That's insane.
This vote will take the Israeli judiciary under the might of the Israeli government, which also controls the legislative branch of the
that is
government
not
of
what
Israel,
it's doing.
and
No.
that will be an autocracy, not a democracy. Yes.
No, and I'll tell you something else. The
Okay.
economy. You mentioned the
Let me tell you something. Why the soldiers are completely right? Because actually, this reform will remove the defense that they have right now. And I read something of the guy who is a candidate to be the president of the Supreme Court, Dr. Rafi Bickton. And let me tell you something. He has no idea what he's speaking about. He doesn't understand the international law. I have to correct him when he doesn't know what he's speaking about. He is saying about, oh, look, there is an investigation against the soldiers, even if we have this kind of Supreme Court. Excuse me? You don't know that the investigations are taking place anyway. It's only at the end that they receive the defense. He does not understand it, and I understand it. I mean, what a terrible change, what a terrible reform that is going to expose the soldiers of Israel, the best soldiers of Israel, to the International Criminal Court. He has no idea what he's talking about. And what is Netanyahu doing? Sacking his defense minister, who is warning, who is telling about the damage, the huge damage. It has nothing to do, by the way, with the criticism against the judicial system. It's not the point. The point is that in many points, I do agree that there should be a change, but not this kind of change, not this kind of reform, not this kind of doing something.
Ben-Dror, Yemini, or Zaki, Ruthie Blum, hold your thoughts right there. We're taking a few minutes break, and we'll be right back with much more to discuss. Don't go anywhere. We're back in a bit. Welcome back to the summit on yet another dramatic evening here in Israel. Still with us, Ruthie Blum, columnist for the Jewish News Syndicate, senior journalist at the Yediot Ahronoth Daily, Ben-Dror Yemini, and Zaki, founder of the Front for the Protection of Democracy, and also the chair of the Meretz Party Executive Board. Thank you for staying with us, ladies and gentlemen. We're also staying on topic, but before we get back to our conversation, the timetable here is very tight, not just because of the legislation blitz, but also because it's the beginning of a very special month here in Israel. Let's take a look at some numbers from Fresh News 12 poll that asked Israelis whether protests should continue on Memorial Day. 63% saying no, 27% saying yes. And the same question, but on Independence Day, should protests continue then? Here, still a majority saying no, 53%, but 41% saying yes. And in this respect, let's begin with another quick-fire round here. And the question is, should protests continue during those sensitive days, Memorial Day and Independence Day? Ori Zaki, what do you think?
I think there's a difference. I think Memorial Day is a day of remembrance. I don't think a widespread protest should take place. Nonetheless, if bereaved families choose to protest, I can't tell them not to protest. If they feel that their sons and daughters were fallen for something else, this is changing. I don't have the moral ability to tell them not to protest. But about Independence Day, listen, might be the last day of independence for Israel's democracy. So protest is very much due.
Ruthie Blum, your thoughts?
I think I agree with Uri on this. I don't have an opinion. I think the protests should stop in order for there to be negotiations. I think the other side thinks that the legislation should stop. So you see, that's really the difference here. And because one of the things this isn't about, and I agree with Ben-Dror on this, that these protests really are no longer about judicial reform. It's a much bigger schism in society right now. It's about reforms. It's about the culture of the country. And so obviously on Independence Day, there are going to be people who want to protest and other people are going to be having barbecues.
Ben-Dror Yemini.
Let me just remind you something. First of all, I'm against this kind of protest in the Memorial Day and in the Independence Day. Just let me remind you that it was a protest in the Memorial Day, last one, against Naftali Bennett. I mean, but I don't want to repeat it. Not against Naftali Bennett, not against Yair Lapid, not against Benjamin Netanyahu. We have to protest against this kind of change, this judicial overhaul, but not against the Independence Day.
Okay, dear panelists, let's please feel free to interact from this point onwards. Zaki is the Attorney General and now the Supreme Court intervening as well, making a mistake not allowing Benjamin Netanyahu to get into business as he declared that he would do, defying the Attorney General's orders this past Thursday?
For weeks, good people told me, and told, not me, the Attorney General, please let Netanyahu step into the game. He will calm everything down. He will take control. Even the President Herzog, reached out to the Attorney General. Now Netanyahu did it himself after he passed a legislation that somehow he believes that has to do with his conflict of interest. But this legislation is about taking out of office. And he said, I'm entering the game. What he did since he did that, he said the legislation blitz is going to continue. And he sacked his Minister of Defense for not agreeing with him. So it seems Netanyahu is the leader of this judicial overhaul. He's the leader of this regime coup in Israel. That's what we expected. That's what we suspected. And that's what's happening. So Netanyahu's role is, he was behind the scenes before. Now he's, up front saying, I want to end Israel's democracy. He doesn't say that in so many words, but his deeds prove it.
Ben-Dror Yemini, not just pilots and military doctors that were until not so long ago a sacred cow, so to speak, not just serving soldiers. Now the chairman of the Medical Association joining the public calls against the reform. Is it moral or immoral for certain sectors to take a stand?
I'm not sure that I can accept or identify with many measures that are taken by the protest. No, not at all. I don't like soldiers who refuse to serve and so on. But we have to remember what we are facing. What we are facing is a real danger to Israel. Nothing to do with being a right-winger or left-winger, nothing to do with the regular criticism against the Supreme Court, against the judicial system. What we have now is something which is much bigger. Look what Netanyahu did this evening. What he did is to accept, actually, the order of Itamar Ben-Gvir, who was the first one to ask Benjamin Netanyahu to sack Yoav Gallant. And that's exactly what Netanyahu did. Now, where are we? Even the defense minister from the Likud is not good enough in order to express his view. What? He wants him to shut down when there is a real danger because of the soldiers, because of the protest, because of so many people that are afraid, but really afraid, that this government is going to expose them, that this government is going to take from them liberties, that this government is going to end to democracy. They are really afraid. Cannot the defense minister express it?
Yes.
Even that we are not allowed to do.
Ruthie, what is more important at this point in time, to pass this legislation or to lower the flames?
Both. It's both. It's important for both. And you mentioned, one of you mentioned President Herzog. A few weeks ago, he got up and he made an announcement about a kind of compromise he had come up with. And the coalition said, you know what, that's something we can work with. And the opposition said, no way, it's all or nothing. And by the time that Herzog drew up an official document for compromise, it had completely changed and made the situation even worse than it is now. So, it's not true that the coalition didn't want to make any compromises, and it is absolutely not true. It is true that there are many protesters who are terrified that it's the end of democracy. I will give you that. It's not everybody who is a cynic, but it is not the end of democracy in Israel. Israel will remain a liberal democracy, but it is right now we're at a crossroads about the character of the country, and there's no question about it. And what will happen, I don't know, but I know that it is absolutely not the end of democracy.
Or Zaki, definitely not the end of protests, but will they be enough to make a change?
I hope so. It is the end of democracy once the executive branch takes over not only the legislative branch but also the judicial branch in a country that doesn't have a constitution, that doesn't have any other checks and balances. That's a real danger. So the people went out to the streets, and there's no counter demonstrations because many of the people who voted for Netanyahu himself are against this. We see this in all the polls. It's not something that came from the people. It's really a dangerous meeting of interests of Prime Minister who's facing a trial, another partner who is not allowed because he was a convict, as you said in your opening film, and the extreme rightist settler parties who really don't want the Supreme Court to stop them making the West Bank into the Wild West. That's the thing. So it's against the people. So the people are going to be there, in their masses. And the protest is going to get much, much, much harsher and much uglier, unfortunately, because we are fighting for the mere nature of Israel as a Jewish homeland, a Jewish homeland, a democratic Jewish homeland.